Hey y'all, how are how are y'all doing on this first day of October as we enter into the last quarter of 2024? Seems like it's just flown by, hasn't it? If you're jumping on, sound off where you're at. We'll do a little roll call down by the well here in a few minutes. Can't help but mention the world seems like it's upside down right now for a lot of folks, especially here in the States, in the wake of Hurricane Helene. A lot of folks that follow along and watch our little channel live in that area, and they're suffering tonight along with others, and just crises everywhere. But God's still in control, and favorite saying I've heard of late, God does all things well. So we have them in our minds and thought and prayer tonight for a quick recovery and healing for that area. Now I'm standing up here in the old pasture. I love standing up here in the high part of it. Lots of things happening in the last few weeks since we've been on a little walk and talk. I'm up here by an old red oak, and when I moved back in several years ago, it was half the size and all taken over by brambles and weeds and things. And I remember Randy, my cousin, coming by and helping kind of right the path of this old place since I really didn't have the equipment. He did. And he's since been back, as you can see from this beautiful pasture, and the goats are loving the fresh hay on the ground. Don't even have to roll it up; just let them get after it. But he's got some background in dealing with trees and the art of arboring, if that's the word. And he said, "You know what, Joel? Let's trim that old tree up a little bit and give it some room to breathe and watch what happens." It's been about 4 years ago, but we had to kind of damage the tree a little bit and cutting some of the lower limbs and trimming it back and probably hurt it a little bit. But my, how it's grown, as you can see. Well, let me see. I think you can. Well, it's blending in, but beautiful shape, and now it's an asset to this old pasture, a place to seek shade because we did a little trimming on it, right? I hadn't been on in a while. I had that old silly COVID here a few weeks ago, and we're fine and healthy, but I've had it a few times, but this time it was a doozy, y'all. Y'all know how us guys are. I have to admit it. We are some kind of sissies when we're sick, aren't we? I guess that's why the good Lord didn't allow us to have babies. We probably couldn't have handled it. We can't even handle a little fever most days, much less a sick mama having to take care of sick kids. But that's the hand that rocks the cradle, right? Rules the world. But no, we're past it. Everything worked out good. Just down for a few days and feeling a little puny, as my mom would used to say. But had a unexpected guest. Our subscribers already know where I'm headed with this because they were privy to it in the feed. Maybe a few of you saw the picture I shared the other evening, early access for them. But my wingman is back on the place. Some of you uh, newer folks to this channel may not remember Jordan being here. That's my second oldest son of four children. Super proud of all of them. And Jordan had been with me for quite some time and helped old dad keep this farm running where we could, and spread his wings and pursued an opportunity in another state for a little while. And it was time for him to come back this way and continue pursuing life in a good way. And I'm not mad about it at all. It's a fool thing taking care of this old place, and to have an extra hand to holler at or to hold a nail or hold a piece of fence, boy, it sure is invaluable. You know it. But it's good to have Jordan home, and he'll be making an appearance on these every now and then. He's not real big on. He's got his own thing going and does some little podcasts and things, but just super proud of that dude, as I am all my kids. We still got the pigs. I have decided that this wasn't the breed I needed, and free was free for a reason when I got them. So I'm passing the blessing along. um, I had put it on marketplace. Got a lot of takers. I've got to catch them first, and they're not too hard to catch, but I just hadn't put the time and energy to get them in the cage. But we're going to let them go on down to wherever they're going. as my pastor used to say, find them another good home because they are absolutely destroying this old pasture. And I'm not real wild about that. I wanted to mention, shared a video a while back about the red boat and the paint job that the carpenter discovered a hole in the boat. Some of you watched it, and had a few naysayers in the comments, as I always do, and I enjoy discussion. Facebook's normally not the place for it, but of course we all have to deal with the hackers and the haters and all that goofiness, and I just hide, delete, and move on, most of them. But when someone's generally asking a question, I do try to respond as best I can. And a couple of people posed a logical rebuttal to that story, that why had the man hired a painter to paint the boat knowing there was a hole in it and it would be inoperable. Well, it set me down a different path. The point of the story was kindness and going a little extra, but it holds a deeper meaning, and I'm glad they asked the question. It didn't take me long to really think about it. As I did, how often in our lives are we painting the boat, putting up a pretty facade on social media and even in daily life, and painting that smile on, look good, feel good, at least we show it that way, but we're dying inside. There's pain and hurt, holes, if you will, in our life that we've never addressed. We just keep painting the cover, hoping that at some point that hurt or hole will heal. Instead of going to the master carpenter, letting him heal our lives through his grace and his love as we paint that boat, the hole in our hearts and lives is repaired. So thank you all for that question. I don't know if it was done in spite or sarcasm, but it held for me a little deeper meaning when that was asked. So thanks for that. Probably not what you intended, but that's how I look at things and look at life. Oh, I got to go down here and turn the water off in this pig pool. That's another thing. I got a couple little kiddie pools for these pigs, but they can't regulate their body heat necessarily, so they got a pig in a mud pie, right? So got to keep them with plenty of water. Been a little dry here. Of course, can't say that about the East Coast. I saw somewhere 40 trillion gallons from that storm. That's a lot of water. My Lord. I've seen that devastation on the coast. I can't imagine it being in a mountainous area where you don't expect that type of thing. So definitely prayers for those folks tonight. People scoff those that think they're going the logical route in regards to God and his sacrifice and the gospel. For me, I don't let it bother me. I came across a story the other day that really impacted me. My sister and I were reviewing it yesterday. In fact, Dad had a little outpatient surgery in Lufkin. Uh, he's going to be the bionic man before it's over with. He needed to get a, y'all hang with me a minute, need to get a replacement hip. And the Lord was smiled favor, and the skilled surgeon was able to do that with no problem. We were sitting in the waiting room reviewing and talking about the Lord and some other things, and laughing and joking about life. And I'd come across this story, and I read it to her, and just her and I I teared up, y'all. I did. I was like, I'm so silly. It's just me and you sitting here, and I'm tearing up reading this story. It didn't even happen to me. But it's a beautiful, beautiful example, a parallel of God's love. I guess it was typical Wednesday night Bible study, nothing special at the little church. Normal crowd was there. The pastor was taking the pulpit after the few normal congregational songs, nothing special. Just a night of gathering with those of like minds. Before we got into the sermon, some of the parishioners had noticed a new person on the platform. It was an older man, kind of bedraggled, weather-worn face, but through his eyes shone a lot of hope. Well, the pastor introduced him as a lifelong friend from his childhood and invited him to come up and say a few words of whatever was appropriate. The pastor shuffled to his chair behind the pulpit as the old man came up and stood before the microphone and greeted the crowd. He told the story of a father that had taken a sailing trip somewhere off the Pacific coast many, many years ago with his son and his son's best friend. As they were sailing, as accomplished and planned as the trip was, a freak storm came up and the winds and waves were raging. As experienced as the father was in navigating the ship through this tumultuous storm, the boat capsized, and all three were at peril to be lost at sea. The father still had a hold of the boat. The two boys were drifting away in fear of drowning. He had just split seconds to act with the lifeline that he had in his hand. There was his son, a Christian, who had made his election sure, and his son's best friend, who didn't know the Lord at that point in his life. Amidst the wind and the waves and the agony of the decision he had to make, he threw the lifeline to his son's friend that was unsaved. As the line whistled through the night air, the waves, the life preserver landed home on his son's friend, and he yelled at the top of his lungs, "I love you, son," just as he disappeared beneath the waves. Son drowned that night. They never recovered the body. And bad deal. Well, through this story, as he was telling it, there were two young men on the front pew there, and they'd been in their own world as normally they were as teenagers, but they'd become pretty attentive to this old man's recounting of the perilous trip at sea that had been experienced by this trio. He looked at the crowd and he said, "How beautiful it is that God would send his only son to die for those that weren't saved." He said, "I couldn't bear the thought of the one boy going to eternity without Jesus." So that's where the lifeline was thrown. With that, he turned around and sat back down in his little seat, and the pastor came up, delivered his normal Wednesday night Bible study sermon with an appeal at the end for those that didn't know the Lord to come forward. It fell on deaf ears, and the service ended, and as people were shuffling out, the two young men that had been intently listening ran to this old man. They said, "Sir, that was an incredible story that you told tonight. We find that hard to believe that a father would sacrifice his son for his son's friend." His nice grin and glimmer in his eyes turned to sorrow as his face elongated and tears welled up. He said, "So you don't think that happened, huh?" They said, "No, that's a pretty far-fetched story." He said, "I understand that." He said, "But young men, I tell you, that stormy night, I was that father that chose to save his son's friend that night, and that son's friend is now your pastor." Amazing story of God and his goodness. That really impacted me to make that choice and to think about how the good Lord's sacrifice of sending his only begotten Son to this world to live a blameless life, die on that cross in full agony, to die, but to be raised up again in the hopes that those would come to him and make their election sure and call on his grace. And that's something beautiful, beautiful story of trust and faith. So those that have come to tell me that maybe there is no God or there is no hope, you come a little bit too late. So that I could demean it, and we could go in the realm of logic and reason and scientific method, of which you couldn't even prove that George Washington lived if you use the scientific method. I could basically just demean it. I was talking to my uh, wise cousin today, and really revere that man, and posed that question to him. I said, does it, and I knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it. You know, at face value, we live a good life. We do right. We maintain self-control. We're good moral people, but yet we never make that crossover to trusting God with all those things in our life that He asks us to do for Him and call on His salvation. A lot of folks go through life that way as agnostics or atheists. I wouldn't want to take that gamble, and I guess you could hedge your bets, but for me, it's a lot deeper than just hedging your bets. Because He's my best friend and guides me with love and truth throughout this whole journey. Wouldn't know where I'd be without Him, to be honest with you. But, anyway, getting off on that tangent. Lots to celebrate around here tonight. God is good all the time, right? Old Jordan's in there getting, he wanted to cook supper tonight, so I didn't argue with that either at all. Hey, something new coming down the pipe. A lot of people have asked me for it, and just finding the time to do it, and I'm going to discipline myself to do it, and we'll probably distribute it. Probably, I guess we'll probably do the video version of it, but auditory might be even better. But got lots of folks that I know and seek counsel with and respect, and we're just going to sit on the porch in some other areas, and we'll do a little podcast each week. Probably release it on Sunday evenings for y'all to enjoy through the week. Just memories of faith and stories and things of good, right? I think the whole world could use some more of that. So we'll still do these live walking talks as they come along. But I'm looking forward to that. Got some pretty good old guests lined up to begin it. We'll come out of the gate slow, but once I commit to something, I'll stay hooked with it, and we'll get it done, right? So maybe we can have a few folks listen to it along the way, but we'll keep everybody abreast here on the page. We'll talk about one more before we do the roll call. Love this one. Talks about a businessman that took a lot of flights across the country, wasn't afraid of flying, enjoyed it. He recounts in a business meeting, motivational speaking engagement that he was performing, of a flight that he had taken across country that was pretty scary. They boarded the plane, no trouble to be seen, and as they were well underway, the captain come across the loudspeaker and said, "I'm sorry, folks, we're about to hit some turbulence, pretty bad storm up ahead. We'll make it through it, but we're going to suspend drink service on this flight, so our apologies. Go ahead and fasten your seatbelts and get ready for a little bumpy ride." Well, as they approached that old thunderstorm, things got pretty rocky. If y'all have flown before, the turbulence was taking them up and crashing them down, and pilot came on again. He said, "We're going to have to skip the meal cart on this one. Everybody needs to stay buckled in for the duration of the flight. We're about to hit some pretty bad stuff." Well, as the storm overtook the plane and the lightning crashed around them and was well above the roar of the engines, everybody was noticeably scared. People were anxious and crying, and some folks were praying. This businessman was pretty worried himself, but he looked over and he noticed a little girl sitting there reading a book quietly, unaffected by the storm around her, had her legs crossed underneath her, and just pretty as you please in her little world there. Said she'd close her eyes every now and then open them back up and continue reading, unaffected by what was happening around her. Well, they survived death's door amidst a horrible flight, extreme terror. Pilot got the plane landed, and as they all exited off, the businessman waited a moment as the little girl exited, and he had to know why she wasn't scared. So he commented to her. He said, "Young lady, I noticed through that whole flight, when it got really bad and scary and people were scared we were going to crash, you seemed unaffected. Why?" She looked up and she said, "Because my daddy's the pilot and he's taking me home." So when you know the pilot, the storms don't bother you, do they? Thought that was pretty good. Well, let's see who all's on here tonight, and I'm going to go in here and see what Jordan's got us cooked up on the old stove that we can't trust. I may have to put on my spectacles, y'all. Hey, I appreciate all y'all following along. Get my hand out of the way and spreading the good news. I think that's how we can shine the light even brighter. If you see something from somebody that you agree with or that you enjoy or lifts you up that day, they've done the heavy lifting. So go ahead and click that share button and pass it along to your friends, right? Never know who you're going to help. All right, let me see who we got on here. There's Miss Whitney Barnes out in Tennessee. I appreciate you, ma'am. She's always sharing good content and passing our stuff along. I really appreciate that. Let's see who else is on here. I see a lot of you, but I'm not going to, unless you comment, I'm not going to call you out. I'll do that favor for you. There's Charlotte Taylor Pafford, longtime follower. Prayers for all the hurricane victims in one way or another. So sad, and we think we have a bad day. Boy, that's the truth, isn't it? That's good stuff, Sharon. Let's see who else is on here. Got a lot of new folks. Got that old silly AirPod in, so my audio won't drop. Boy, that aggravates me so bad. There's Andrew out in Interlaken, Florida. I'm assuming he hadn't moved. Good to see me. Glad Jordan is back to lend a hand or two around the farm. Guess those pigs are rooting up the place. Yep, time to send them on a trip. And they ain't big enough to eat. I ain't gonna fool with them anyway. But they've had a good run here and they've been happy. So we'll send them to the next bed and breakfast. How about that? They'll be fine. There's my buddy Ray Lucas, back from the olden days in Huntsville, Texas. Good to see you, buddy. Thanks for checking in. I see lots of friends here. There's Deborah up in Michigan. Good to see you, ma'am. Anybody else? See, there's Miss Naomi Terry. Thank you, ma'am, for all of your support. Angie Perry's in Maryland. Howdy, ma'am. Good to see you. Susan from Texas, and she'll leave it at that. Susan, let me see, Minshew. Well, I don't know if I can do this. Susan Minshew Bustamante. I hope I got that right. Sorry if I didn't. I tried. All right, I think that's everybody. We'll call it a night and say farewell to the pigs maybe by the next round. Poor Randy was out there trying to mow that pasture down, and he got it done. Thank goodness. Boy, he has made some. I come home from working, and he's loading his truck with his stuff. I'm like, man, I didn't even know you was home. I'd been here. No, it didn't take me no time. Pushing these old dead limbs around and burn piles and overgrowth, and boy, he got it done. He's a cousin, good friend, and a mentor. We really enjoy talking. He'll be doing some podcasting with me a little bit, and some other good buddies. But looking forward to that. So I hope y'all are too. I try to coordinate it where we can take some questions ahead of the podcast. I don't know how I'm going to do that. We won't do it live because you never know, a squirrel may run across the porch or something. But I guess that'd be all right too, wouldn't it? Hey, y'all, keep the world and home in your prayers tonight. A lot of folks suffering from different events. We all see the headlines. And 2 Timothy 1:7, I believe it was, is really on my mind tonight because he did not give us the spirit of fear. Just didn't do it. We got to trust and keep shining, being the light, and walking forward, right? So y'all join me in that. And we'll see you on the next round. Pasture walking. Be the light. We'll talk to y'all later.